Hi, this is Bernhard Wiemann, and this is the second part of the car creation tutorial for TORCS. For details and the required tools, please have a look into the first part. In this part we will add a driver to the 3D model and lay out the texture coordinates for the model. I plan to use the driver model of an existing car, so I make first a copy of the car 1, stock 1. As you can see, there is no .ac model file into the directory, so we get it from the internet. I set the sticky tag to get the desired version, and then I download the file. Now I open the model and select the desired parts. Now I am going to check if the selection contains everything I want. The selection looks fine, so I save it with Save Selection. I am done with getting parts from this model, so I go back to the tutorial car. I want to reuse as well two textures from the stock car, the driver texture and the carbon fiber-like texture, so I copy those to our working directory. This is required because otherwise the car model will contain paths to the textures, and we do not want that. In TORCS, everything belonging to one car should be in one directory. Now I am importing the previously saved cockpit into the tutorial car model. Right after the import, I quickly check the model hierarchy. Every new part should be attached directly below the world object. Yep, this seems okay. Then I start adjusting the size, width and position of the imported cockpit parts such that it fits our model. Okay, I'm done now with the cockpit inside part, so let's check a last time if something is overlapping or misaligned or so. Yeah, I think it looks good and is okay. I am going to start laying out the texture coordinates in a moment, but for that I need first a high contrast texture to check the alignment. To create the texture I use here the GIMP and I apply a checkerboard and some fine lines. You can create such a texture as well with Photoshop, but first you have to download the free plugins from Adobe to handle the RGB file format. So it is done, so I export it as RGB file. Back to the model. First I select in the hierarchy view the car body parts to lay out the texture coordinates. Now I go into the texture coordinate editor and start laying out the parts. The texture layout defines how it is later possible to paint the car. With this top-down texture layout it would now be not possible to draw on the car sides. So we have to map the car side separately. We will do this now. A note specific to the tutorial here. I switch all the time on and off the texture coordinate editor. This is pretty uncomfortable, but usually you won't do this because you have enough screen real estate or multiple screens. So the rough initial layout is done, so we can load the checkerboard texture and start fine aligning the stuff. I usually align the parts outside of the background image such that I can see it better on the checkerboard. It looks very nervous and is hard to see. In the 3D model window in the background you can see that the texture coordinates are updated on the fly if you move parts, so you know if you are working on the right surface and if the orientation fits. To align the parts properly, I move them near to each other or even such that they overlap, and then you can see on the surface geometry if the alignment matches or not. In the background window with the 3D model you can check then on the model if the texture matches. Okay, I'm happy with the alignment now. The next step is to move the side surface a bit away from the top surface. This is to avoid color bleeding when mapping is applied. I continue now with the other sides. The texture layout I choose allows the user later to draw straight perpendicular lines over the car. As next step, I check if the alignment is proper if I zoom in. This is fine so far, so I continue with selecting more parts and texture map those. So the cockpit inside, the roof inside and such are still to do. We do not need to texture map the driver itself because we imported it from the other model including the texture. All parts are now laid out and ready for being mapped to the black square. This is the available texture space. When the checkerboard texture disturbs me too much, then I select objects and set the texture to no texture. Of course, I will have to reset it back to the right texture afterwards. So I am done with the car body, cockpit and such, and now what's remaining is the wheel housing and the car bottom. For the car bottom and the wheel housing I will use the carbon fiber-like texture and this will be tiled. I scale the texture coordinates such that the resolution of the pattern is the way I like it. Finally, I just review the model and check it for errors. I hope you enjoyed this part of the tutorial. In the next part we will then actually paint on the textures such that the car will have a nice look. Bye, hope to see you next time.